Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Gathering for Justice's ongoing Virtue Town Hall series, Our Voice, Our Power. My name is Luis Hernandez, and I'm the National Director of Youth Campaigns and Leadership here at the Gathering for Justice. For those of you who don't know, the Gathering was founded by the legendary artist and activist Harry Belafonte in 2005 after he saw a story on the news about a 5-year-old Black girl in Florida being handcuffed in her kindergarten classroom for throwing a tantrum. After realizing that children of color were being brutalized by police across the country, despite the work being done by his peers during the civil rights movement, Mr. Belafonte brought together a movement of elders and youth from across the United States to form a covenant to end child incarceration and dismantle the systemic racism in our system. The Gathering will be celebrating our 17th anniversary at the end of August, and I can already say that we are busier and have a more ambitious agenda than ever before. Of course, much of the work centers youth and youth leadership, and this series, Our Voice, Our Power, was specifically developed to be a platform for young people to share ideas and collaborate on some of the most pressing issues facing our communities. And so tonight, we have assembled an exceptional group of community leaders and organizers from across the country who can help us dive deeper into the topics of public safety, particularly from the youth lens. And so before we begin, we want to, as the Gathering, send our love and concern to those New Yorkers dealing with the aftermath of yesterday's tragic violence in our subways. We hope that you and your families are safe. We know that these are very scary times. And after coming out of a 2-year global pandemic, our young people are dealing with an onslaught of intersecting critical issues from economic realities, inflation, the loss of promised jobs, housing, and education, rising gun violence, and a rising tide of white extremist violence, not to mention a reintroduction of dangerous policing across the nation. Young people, particularly young people of color, are literally in the crossfire of a policing and criminal justice system that is inherently unjust, and media and political narratives determined to use fear to keep the machine running as it was always intended. It's going to be up to us to define safety for ourselves and the generations to come, to effectively propel public health systems that center the experiences of victims and survivors while transforming the reactionary and carceral narrative on public safety and policing. And now I'm incredibly excited to welcome my co-moderator, and I like to say co-conspirator, Jasmine Delafosse, our Stockton community organizer who currently leads the Gathering for Justice's state efforts in California.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you for that introduction. I'm incredibly proud to be working and serving alongside you as we continue to really build this beloved community. And as young people, it's exciting to be able to be in conversation with some of these young people, phenomenal young leaders that we will be introducing in just a minute. I'm super, super excited to just welcome our panelists who are coming from across the country to really talk with us about what does it really mean for us to redefine safety. I really just want to take a moment before we do that to want to just take a deep breath as we honor all of the young people who are putting in work, and young people who are continuing to be on the front lines and holding this space with us. And so we welcome you all to just sit there as you're watching, to take a deep breath with us as we embody all of the young people who are doing this work for. And so first, I would like to just introduce our first panelist, Tumani Drew of the Young Women's Freedom Center. Tumani, known as Tu, is a sister to hella siblings. She's a descendant of warriors and resilient woman. She lets her ancestors and experience guide her path in fighting against white, toxic, patriarchal systems. Tumani studied grassroots method and is the power of historical transformational social movements while obtaining her bachelor's degree in urban studies at the San Francisco State University. She's gained her experience with community organizing during her internship with the Black Organizing Project, where she helped mobilize the Bettering Our School System campaign, where she moved all levels of police out of Oakland Unified School District. Welcome, Tumani. We're so honored to have you with us tonight. Next, I want to welcome Destiny Hamilton. Destiny is a community organizer in John Jay College of Criminal Justice alumni. Her passion to defend civil liberties and fight against injustice led her to the NAACP, where she served almost every position on the state and local executive committee. Currently, Destiny works with anti-gun violence organizations like the Coalition of Passionate Youth to help keep our community safe while providing resources for our youth. I'm excited to also introduce, thank you, Destiny, for joining us. We're so glad to have you here with us today. Our panelist, Malik Diallo, who's with Youth Over Guns. Malik Diallo is a 20-year-old sophomore attending Georgia State University, taking after his father, his focus of computer science as he aspires to work in the cybersecurity field. He is currently an anger to advocacy fellow with Youth Over Guns, where nation work to address gun violence holistically. Welcome, Malik. Next up, we have Kyaune Mckibbins, who joins us from Compton, California, with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. Kyaune currently is serving with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition as a policy advocate. Prior to joining ARC, he was a youth participant through their programs. He's continued his advocacy to push for a reimagined youth justice system. A majority of supervisors in LA called for initial steps that they could lead to close and demolish the country's oldest 110-year-old central juvenile hall. Kyaune was a part of and one of the advocates who led that effort, and has also served time in both local and state detention facilities. And through his lived experience, he's committed to organizing efforts to fight for stronger policies to protect youth and reinvest in their leadership. Kyaune, we're so honored to have you with us today. And we'll have a few other guests join us a little bit later into our program. But while we get started, I just wanted to welcome you all and really just ground ourselves in this conversation. Many of us have been either working in the intersections of violence prevention, gun violence, juvenile justice, criminal justice work, and working really in the intersections of really the common the conversation around safety. And so I wanted to just hear from you all around, what does safety mean to each of you? What does it look like and what does it feel like? And so if any of you would like to go first, I'm looking at you, Tumani, if you want to kick us off, sis.
I just took off my mic too. So safety to me sounds like investing in our communities. Folks can't feel safe if they don't have a house to go to, or clean water, or the resources to like go to school or get a job like that sustains you. And then also, it's also like gun violence prevention, right? Programs and like intervention. We see that police and jails don't work. It's not working. So it's like having like trusted community leaders that's been from like, that look like you, that come from where you come from, that's like been in the same circumstances as you, that could like help you like see a different pathway. Yeah, so somebody to trust in, and yeah, that's what I'll say.
Thank you, Tumani, for that. Go ahead, Destiny.
Sorry. Safety to me, I agree. It has to be a holistic approach. And I feel like safety to me is addressing the issues that cause people to act violently, like realizing where that stems from and addressing it and providing youth with those resources, because no one just wakes up one day and decides, I want to be violent. It has to be something within them that they have experienced that has caused this type of behavior. So looking at it from education standpoint, from just the way our communities are set up, the way our communities are designed, the infrastructure or the lack thereof, all of these things play a part within safety. So to me, it's more than just, policing and law enforcement. To me, it's a community effort that really pays attention to the individual needs of a person.
Thank you so much, Destiny. I want to also take a moment to also welcome another panelist who's going to join us, Jewellian Johnson, a community organizer. Jewellian grew up in Fairfield, California, in a household plagued with systemic barriers of incarceration, poverty, government support, domestic violence, substance use, and mental health troubles. Since arriving in Stockton, Jewellian had the opportunity to intern under former Mayor Michael Tubbs to distribute funds for COVID relief and working to research policy and establishing ongoing equity committees for Delta College student government. He has served in several statewide education committees under the Chancellor's Office for the Community College System, with particular focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Additionally, he has worked with the ACLU, public health advocates, and critical resistance groups. Currently, Jewellian is working through his third year of college while serving as a youth advisor for All Cove Mental Health, and is also currently running for city council in his hometown of Stockton. So Jewellian, welcome. Thank you. And Kyaune, I'm gonna pass it to you if you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So safety to me, I interpret safety as like basically trust in our communities, like even with policing and all that stuff. Like, as long as we come and we are empathetic, right? We're empathetic and we understand what each other is going through. Like, just because you grew up in a certain area doesn't mean you can't be safe just because you grew up in a certain area. Just because you were in poverty doesn't mean you can't be safe. Like, and I feel like police need to understand that, like, safety is just something that it can be internalized. Like, you can find safety within each other, right? So that's how I view safety.
Thank you for that. We wanted to just hear from you all, sort of. What were times when you felt like you were most unsafe, most times when you felt harmed, times where you felt powerless? We just love to hear from you all, sort of your experience of times where you felt most unsafe in your communities.
I can begin. So my very first time, when I think of a time when I felt unsafe, I was born in New York and I was raised in New Jersey, and I was also raised in New York. So I'm from New York and New Jersey. I was in middle school and I was in New Jersey, and me and my friend and I, we were playing around and we accidentally knocked over the fire extinguisher. The firefighters came to the school. They made a whole big deal out of it, and we were actually taken to court. I was so young at the time, I didn't even know what was going on, but I just remember me saying, like, it was an accident. I did not mean to, but my school still felt it necessary to take me as a middle schooler to court over a mistake. All I remember being in that courtroom just crying the entire time. I felt so unsafe. I didn't know what was gonna happen to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I gonna go to jail? Like, what is gonna happen to me? I didn't even know anything the judge was saying. I was just crying. So that was my very first moment where I felt unsafe. And when I think of it now as an adult, it just dawns on me like, wow, like, you were so young then. And it just shows you how much your school did not, look at you as a child. At that moment, they looked at you as an offender, someone who harmed our school, and she needs to be punished, rather than pouring the resources into you. And even still to this day, when I think of situations like that, it's at the hands of people who are supposed to be there for you and people who are supposed to protect you. Most recently, I was in a car with someone. We got pulled over, and literally 6 police officers came out of their car for this very minor offense. So it's just little instances like that on a daily basis that can make a person not feel safe. And of course, I was able to get over it, but there's people in life that don't get over it. And then those are the type of people that if they do commit a crime or they do commit something that's not favorable, then they're seen as a criminal, and they're seen as someone that it doesn't belong to society because they're making these horrible decisions, not realizing that, you know, throughout their entire life, the people who are supposed to protect them have actually been the ones to cause them this harm and cause them this trauma that has made them do these certain decisions.
Thank you, Tumani. How about you? What were times when you felt like you all felt most unsafe, or when your community felt most unsafe? You want to share some examples or experiences that you had either in Oakland Unified or in San Francisco?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is like at home when it was incidents of like domestic violence, and then even so that was like when I was a child, right? And like not knowing who to call, like no one can't call the cops, and like these are the adults in here, so like can't even go to the adults here. So really felt like, who do you run to? And then even recently, it's like my neighbors, it's 2 neighbors who are dealing with domestic violence issues, and I'm just stuck. Like I can't, it's not effective to call the police. So like I'm like, okay, I have to build relationships with these folks to know that I am somebody that they could come to. But like even then, like just having to sit there and listen to it, it just like really messed with me. Like, and those were just times where I just felt like really hopeless, and like, or not like hopeless, but like what can I do to contribute to like help these folks? Yeah, I can leave and I'm safe, but like my folks aren't, my community isn't. So those are the moments that just came to my head, was like those domestic violence situations when you can't go, when there's, if you go to the cops, it's really nothing you could do, they can do. It's not like an effective solution. So like what can community do to like be there for each other, you know?
Jasmine, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was saying that as we think about safety and all of that you've shared, I think to your point is that we know that systems sometimes are also can do harm in responding to crisis, right? And to your point that we are best fit and qualified to sometimes respond, even though we don't have the answers. I think oftentimes what we heard from many of you so far is that safety doesn't really exist with the conversations that we're having around law enforcement, but rather exist within community and within ourselves, that we have the tools and resources to really respond to sort of violence or harm as we see safety sort of come up in our communities. Jewellian, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad to have you. Love to hear from you in your response, or Kyaune, in your response to what are some of the times you felt unsafe in your communities, and if that is something either of you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So the first time I felt unsafe was about when I was around 10 years old, and we were taken from my mother. Me and my little sister we were taken from my mother and we were placed in DCFS, which is the Child Protective Service, right? And I felt like not only did I feel unsafe, but I felt like useless, and I felt like I couldn't be there for my sister for the first time, because I always been the big brother and I always was there for her. So me being split up from her, I felt useless and I felt unsafe, not only for me, but I felt like I couldn't do nothing to help her. And it's crazy how our system is set up to where like they split up, like not only they split us from our mother and our parents, but they split us up from our siblings as well. And they don't understand how that can hurt somebody. Like even like that made me like, that made me go harder, but it made me, it turned me into a colder person, because like you splitting up from my sister and you splitting me up from my family. So it's like, what do I have now, right? And the system has created these things. These systems have created these it's hard to explain. It's like these theories, like they create these things knowing certain things like this is going to happen, because they want to see us apart. They want to see us split up. They want to mess up our communities, and just splitting us up like that can do damage. So that was the first time I felt unsafe.
Yeah, and I can kind of back in on, off the ones that were preached before. I appreciate y'all having me. I know I had some signal issues getting in, but for me, it was also like a really young age. I think I was 4, first time like we had domestic violence incidents, and so kind of reaping on like how the family was, split apart. Trauma often induces, not just like momentary lapses, but also long-term, situations in which, I grew up as a kid, not having, anyone to come, for Father's Day events, or not wondering why, my father wasn't in the home. Making it feel like those things, were personal, or that, I did something personally. And then even later on with the services that we, should be coming into the home to reconcile those type of things, especially knowing what our parents grew up, right in the middle of the crack epidemic. My parents were right there in Sunnyvale, and the projects in Geneva Towers, right where that happened. So it wasn't like something that was, it just happened, right? These were intentional or explicit policies that kind of tear our families apart. And so even longer after that, growing up as a kid, like there are times where, services that are supposed to be deemed as protecting and supporting, those ended up being the ones that criminalized me, or made it seem as if I was the problem in society. And so I'd have instances where like cops would, stare me down or follow me all the way back home to see what I was doing, or even like a car situation incident where like my tag wasn't on the back, even though you could read my plates because they have it in their system that like I paid my expiration and I paid my tags. It would turn into like a search and seizure for things like guns or looking for drugs in a car. And so those are just instances where you feel like you can't really fit in, or that like you're a problem within your own community. And those are oftentimes explicit or implicit.
Thank you for that. I wanted to jump around here and appreciate you all for sharing just around your personal experiences and how those have impacted your lives. We wanted to dive a little bit deeper here. I know that many of you have experienced challenges, and obviously safety is something that affects folks holistically. And so want to hear from all of you, what is your shared understanding of how we build safety, socially, culturally, politically, emotionally, and spiritually? What does safety look like for you, and how are you all actively building that?
I can go first again. So currently, I do a lot of work with the crisis management systems of New York. I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with Life Camp, where I was their youth education and career coordinator, and now I'm working with DRUM, Developing Righteous United Movements. And within the Cure Violence model, we look at gun violence as a disease that has to be cured. And we try to approach it from a holistic perspective, which means getting to the root of the problem. Like, what happened with this particular person that has caused them to do this behavior? Oftentimes, when you look at violence in our communities, it stems from a lack of economic opportunity. So what we try to do is see what ways we can help a person increase their socioeconomic status. What did they lack in their life within school? How did the school system fail them? Just life in general. Like, growing up in the hood is just so hard. We all know the various things that contribute to that, to people acting in those type of behaviors. So what we try to do is to just bring the neighbor back in the neighborhood, bring the community back, make people feel prideful in being in their community, and let them understand their power. Like, look, you are a king and you are a queen, and if you see yourself as that, then you shouldn't be conflicting harm onto others. I think that's just the best approach, just to get people to see the power within themselves. Because when people feel powerless, it leads to, bad behaviors. When you know that you are this strong person and you are resilient, and we come from such a resilient people, it don't matter what they tried to do to Black people, we overcame everything, and we always will. So I always try to look at it from an individual perspective and just get people to see their worth and to see their power and speak truth to that power.
I love that. Thank you, Destiny. Would love to hear from you, Tumani.
Yes. So your question again was, what are we doing to create safety in our communities?
Yep.
Okay. So in SF right now, that's where I'm organizing. We're currently shutting down juvenile hall. We got the law to pass it down, so now we're in the implementation phase. So making sure, folks got their rights. We're creating this bill of rights for folks that are inside, making sure they have access to like proper hygiene, access to education, cultural programs. And then it's like and then we're just making, so like when folks hear like, oh, juvenile hall shut down, like there's not going to be a place for accountability. It's still accountability. It's just community by community for community type thing. And we're making sure that they're like, an organizer here is always like, people kept looking at me like I was the problem instead of changing my circumstances. So that's another approach that we're doing. Like, yes, we're supporting this youth to be able to like thrive and transform, but also like supporting the families. Let's help the mom with the 3 jobs and like, the single household. Let's help her out so the youth doesn't have to go out and make money or do what they do to like survive. So it's taking those approaches as like and what else, yeah, like building these like mentorship programs for folks, for like young folks to like look up to and get connected to like more cultural programs. Like there's hella programs in San Francisco. It's just getting them like access to it. So yeah, those are the things that I could think of right now.
Okay, so I work alongside the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and we're working on a few things. So one of the things we also worked on a bill that closed the DJJ, which is the Department of Juvenile Justice, which is basically like a youth youth prison in California, which I just recently got out of about 5 months ago. So we passed that bill, and that DJJ should be closing around 2023. And we're also working on to close a lot of the juvenile halls in LA County as well. So, and I'm working with them on that too, because I was literally just there. So it's just crazy to me. It's just crazy for me to be out and to be able to advocate for things that I was just going through. Like I was wishing, like, damn, I wish we had more things. So it's crazy that now I'm granting the wishes for those who are behind me. And we're also working towards having community messengers, right? Credible messengers, which is basically the same thing as mentors, right? But these credible messengers will work like as like like big homies, big homies. Like I know you guys understand what big homies are, but so basically like these young dudes like that's gang banging and stuff like that. They're most likely to listen to a big homie or somebody that's been through what they've been through because that's who they're listening to on the outs. So we're bringing people that were just got out of jail who have records were formerly in the gang back inside to talk to these young dudes and to just to show them like going to school is cool, like going to having a 9 to 5 is cool, because a lot of these dudes don't think that's cool. A lot of these dudes were taught to go rob, a lot of these dudes are go taught to pick up a gun and stuff like that. But if we got these big homies coming back in and showing these dudes and as credible messages, like showing these dudes like, look, I got a job, look, I'm going to school, and I was just doing the same thing you was doing. So I feel like the dynamic of that, it just changed the whole concept of what cool is, because a lot of these kids don't think school and stuff like that is cool. And also we just trying to redefine what success means to these youth. And I feel like once we redefine what success means to the youth, I feel like the community be safer. So it's some very powerful things we're doing right now.
If I can add on, just with like for us, I know like we've been working in our organization looking more so like at a lot of social factors in terms of like what kind of leads people toward, I guess, a life of crime. And really like I think the epistemology of criminality has to change, in which we look at the factors that induce crime in terms of not having livable wages, in terms of not having suitable housing, which is oftentimes dilapidated in communities that are predominantly Black or brown, and even looking at environmental degradation, like the all-around factors in terms of like the situation or the infrastructure that we live in, kind of induces that. And so do we really look at the person who's led to a life in a legal market selling drugs because you're making more than you would at a 40-hour wage, 40 or a minimum wage job in which you're working 40 hours? I mean, if we're looking wholesale, I think there was $40 billion in wage theft last year alone. So like, do we really look at the leadership, or do we look at the people on the bottom and talk about the situations that we live in? Because housing is the number one social determinant for leading toward crime. And then also looking beyond that, if we're looking at historically or now, oftentimes the age in which crime is usually like a spike in is 18 to 24. And so we don't have anything that oftentimes or has a pipeline that leads young people to a successful life. And that's more so a systemic thing. If we're looking at a system in which, you know, profit is the main way to go, or profit is the way in which we live our life, then we're not going to place value on humanity. And so I think a lot of times there's a lot of things systemically that has to change. And I think that often starts with the people that we're putting into office. And so I think being actively engaged with the policies, the legislature, as well as the people who are leading the communities. I think if we're talking about building a new public safety system, we have to look at building radical dependence on each other. Like people have said, having, you know, big homies come in, or having parents be more involved, or having roundabout support systems that are actively engaged. Because, you know, I think every Black family here is like, it takes a village to raise a child, and we're not looking at that, or we're not getting that. Instead, oftentimes we're getting punitive systems that are putting our children into prisons.
Thank you for that. I appreciate all of you for really getting in depth there. Something that I heard a few of you say in different ways were some of the ways in which your communities are activating formerly incarcerated folks, folks who are just being released from facilities. Kyaune, yourself as an example, who've now come out and are supporting young people, are supporting communities, are weaving through some of these issues that are impacting. Dating back to Biden's 1994 crime bill during his time in the Senate, where young people were deemed to be super predators, there was this fear created that somehow young people were inherently violent, somehow young people were inherently criminals. And so as you all talk about this, and as young people yourselves bringing this nuance to the space, I think one, clearly we know that that's a falsehood, but two, we hear about things like credible messengers, community leaders, programs like CMS. I'd love to hear from you all. What do those programs do? And what are their results? I think folks oftentimes want to know whether or not the work that our community is doing is effective. Most recently, I know that the efficacy of programs like a CMS were called into questioning, but there's data to prove some of it. And so just wanting to hear from some of you, what are the results you're seeing in the field, and how are you all actively creating impact in these communities through these programs, through credible messengers and community leaders who are engaging young people?
I could go. So, credible messenger is like in the works of being implemented in the new place that will, you know, replace juvenile hall, and for the youth that are being sent to their local county from DJJ. So we haven't really seen that yet. However, like at the Young Women's Freedom Center, I feel like we have self-determination coordinators, right? And it's similar to me. It's like court advocacy, and then like letting folks like work with them, work on their goals, like letting them like think about who was I before incarceration, like who was I before I got impacted by this system, and just like supporting them navigate these systems like on the outside too and in the inside, like letting them know like you got these rights, like you don't have to take this, like you deserve more than these like reproductive programs, like you could learn more about these systems and like work towards your goals. So that's so far like what we are working on, but like the programs that they are working on implementing is like more so like mentorships, and then like getting resources to the families, like it's like changing the circumstances that the youth are in, not just the youth.
Okay, I could touch on it. So, criminal messenger is I feel like it's pretty vital because when you it's like the trust thing with the safety we were talking about, and trust, like when you can trust somebody who's been through exactly what you've been through. Like when I was on the inside, like I couldn't, like it would be programs coming in, but it would be people who never been through what I've been through, and it just feel like it's just robotic, almost robotic. Like it just didn't feel genuine. So I couldn't, I hear what they saying, but I wasn't really listening to what they were saying. Like if I had a dude like, coming in from Compton who just got out the pen, he telling me like, bro, you should go to school. Like, the streets ain't for you. Like, the streets ain't got nothing to offer for you. Like, just go to school and go to work, do this and do that. Like, I would have, I would have grasped that way easier than some white person coming in trying to tell me to do that. Like, what you know about what I'm going through. So credible messages is just, it's vital. And I'm also like still keeping contact with a lot of dudes who are inside. So, I get jail calls like almost every day. So me getting those jail calls and just me, keeping relationships and building these relationships with these dudes on the inside is vital, because because I know how it is. Like when you don't have nobody to call, you don't have nobody to write to, you just feel like everybody left you for dead. You just feel like, you're nobody. You just feel like you just walking dead. So I like keeping in contact, just communication with those on the inside is just extremely important. It gives light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of these young guys that's going through what they're going through in there.
For me, working within my field, we through the CMS, we operate using violence interrupters and outreach workers. And so violence interrupters, these are the people who were formerly incarcerated. These are the people who are responsible for a lot of the crime during the time where the war on drugs and the super predators, they're responsible for that. And so these are people who have come out, who have did so many years in jail, who have committed so many crimes, and they don't want to see that for this generation to come, because they can speak to the horrors of it, the horrors of being in prison and how they treat you. And how they do it is they go for the most high-risk youth in our community, the gang members, the people who are shooting or have the potential to be shot, and they work with them to try to change their life around. They connect them to different resources and different jobs. If a young person is like, yo, I'm only selling drugs because I wanna be a rapper, I wanna have my career take off, but I can't afford it, then we'll be like, okay, well, let me get you a job so you can afford some studio time. Let me connect you to someone in the studio that could give you, a good rate. We'll even help pay for it. So it's just different things like this where you really have to get and look at the individual's needs. I say the difference between a violence interrupter and a police officer is that a violence interrupter genuinely cares about the individual, and they, with all their heart, want to see them change. My current position, I'm a outreach worker supervisor, and so my job is to connect the youth in the community to different resources, different opportunities, place them in various programs, and it does work. I would say that the work that we do prevents a lot of young people from falling victim to the school to prison pipeline. there's so many kids that are like in school, but they're on the verge of, all right, I don't want to go anymore. I think I'm a dropout, or, oh, I just got suspended. And now I don't even want to go back because my teachers don't care about me. And the school safety always picking on me. Like, school to prison pipeline is very real. And I believe that the work that we do directly prevents you from falling victim to it. And I do know a lot of people, question, like, does this model really work? And I can say that if you don't work within it, like if you're not in the field, it's easy to see how it doesn't, because, there's a level of confidentiality that you have to keep. But I've literally seen, like, people taking guns out of young people's hands, people preventing retaliation. It's been gang members that, once nobody could do nothing to them and they wasn't going to retaliate. But now that they've been working with these violence interrupters, and these violence interrupters have been sharing their stories and telling them, like, yo, bro, you don't want to go down that path, they stop retaliating. So it definitely works. And I think it's just a great thing to see when the community pours into each other, and we don't have to rely on any outside source that just wants to criminalize us and demonize us. You have people who genuinely care, and it has good results.
Absolutely. Appreciate y'all. Anyone else want to tap into this question? All right, Jasmine, passing it to you.
Yeah, no. First of all, I just want to just stop and for a moment, just want to appreciate each and every one of you. I'm just incredibly proud just to hear about the work that you all are doing as young people. There was this quote that I recently came across that said, all of us, all around, young people are at the forefront of asking how we imagine a different future, but their theorizing goes unnoticed because youth are seen as the junior partners of the social movement. And what we really know is that you all are really at the front lines, really reimagining what it means to be credible messengers, what it means to be violence interrupters, and what does it really mean for us to really think about the ways we show up in our community. And I think it's easy for people to say, hey, we need law enforcement to respond, right? But what's much harder is to do what you all are saying, right? Is to actually get in the streets, right? Talking with our neighbors, talking with our community around what kind of resources our people need, right? And that's the work that is incredible. Like, that's the work that needs to happen and the work that is needed. And I think that when we center that conversation around the reinvestment, around the work that is happening on the ground, that is when we can get much further in this conversation. Just kind of want to piggyback on some of the conversations we had. I just want to know from each of you sort of what are the values or principles that you all are using to guide your work around safety, around gun violence work that you're leading, or violence prevention work, around community violence. What are some of the things that help guide your work in the ways that you all show up as young people?
I I would say for me, empathy is one of the biggest, because I always like to put myself in someone else's shoes. It's so easy to judge someone, especially if you've never been in their shoes or never had to do, fight for your life or do this type of thing. So I always just like to have empathy. You have to understand where a person is coming from in order to relate to them, in order to, just connect with them. And also authenticity, just be your authentic self in hopes that they will open up to you. And I think, though, with empathy and authenticity, it makes for, good work.
Yeah, I agree. Empathy is very, 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 very important. What I'll say is I'm very like selflessness. Like, I'm very selfless. Like I want to see I want to see everybody win. Like that's really like me. Like, if you know me, I just want to see everyone win. Like, I don't want to see nobody falling behind. Even when I was on the inside, when a dude, like, even the coldest, the hardest dude, don't like, everybody don't like, I used to try to go over and talk to him, like, bro, like, Like, you ain't gotta do this, you ain't gotta do that. So I always was the preacher, and everybody used to call me the preacher because I'm always trying to preach to everybody and just walking by faith. Like, I'm walking faith, like I truly believe in God, and I'll just put everything in His hands, and that's what keeps me going, because I just know everything is gonna be all right as long as I'm walking in by faith. So that's what keeps me going, and I just love what I do. Like, I love that I can, like, I love how I was raised, even though I didn't have the greatest upbringing, but it made me who I am today. So I just love it, and I embrace it. I don't like, shy away from it, because right now I'm an undergraduate at Cal Poly Pomona, and I want to go to law school. And a lot of people be asking me, like, how you want to go to law school? They used to gang bang. You got tattoos all over your body. Like, are you gonna cover it up? I'm like, nah, I'm gonna embrace it. Like, I want people to see, like, I want people to see it, like, okay, like, see where I came from and see where I'm heading. Like, I just want, like, the clients to see, like, okay, like, yeah, like, I was you. I was sitting in your shoes. Like, now I'm your lawyer. So I just want, like, people to understand, like, you just gotta embrace it. Just embrace it.
I could go next. So I like what you said there. Like, I was in your shoes, now I'm your lawyer. But I would say relationship building, community, and dang, I just had it. Investing in like our communities while like divesting from these institutions, these punitive institutions, and like love, trust. Not to sound corny, but like just knowing I got you, you got me type thing. So yeah.
I appreciate each and every one of you who've tapped in. Wanted to just ask a follow-up question. What are some of the current campaigns and projects? I know some of you mentioned some of the work you're doing earlier, but for those who are watching, how can they follow your work? How can they be a part of really this conversation we're talking about redefining safety? If how would you tell your neighbor, your peers, your classmates, your young people, if we're all a part of this movement to redefine safety, to have police-free schools, how are you all bringing your young people along? How can people who are watching join us and use your models and practices, and join your efforts to move forward in us and in our own fights and campaigns that we're sharing? Love to hear from you all, sort of how folks can join your movements.
So I'll go. So for the so I work with I'll reiterate it. I work for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and literally anybody can become a member. All you got to do is go to the ARC website, and it's gonna be a button at the top. You just click become a member, and then there you go. You're basically a member. We'll give you a text. We'll give you a call. However you want to be contacted, and you can help. But you don't have to become a member to become a member. You know what I'm saying? Like you can do this. Like you don't have to be a member of no coalition. You could just do this on a daily basis. Just show empathy and just treat people how you want to be treated, or treat a child how you want your child to be treated. And if everybody reciprocates those two things, then I feel like the world would be a better place.
I could go after. So so the same thing, like you could follow our IG, young_women_free. And then we have Sister Warriors, Freedom Coalition. This is like a intergenerational space where we use like, policies, social justice, siblinghood to like fight against these systems that negatively impact us. And Yeah, so like you could follow us on there, and then like also like if you're in community, we're having like these hood huddles to like bring awareness to folks, like what does it mean that juvenile hall is shutting down, and like what kind of like with y'all this conversation, like what is public safety, like who keeps us safe. So yeah, just having those conversations so you could follow our movements on our IGs and website.
And Tumani, y'all are so humble. Y'all are doing some incredible work. I know you also have the Sister Warriors Coalition, and so y'all have a lot of reach now. You all are in San Francisco and LA. Do you want to share some of the other communities for folks who are from California who are listening around areas within the region that folks can tap in even to joining some of the movements and coalition work that you all are leading?
Yeah, we got spaces in like San Jose, LA. There's so many other chapters in like Fresno for Sister Warriors. And like, we're working on like statewide policies. So you guys could for sure follow those movements on our IG. Thank you for that.
So with the CMS system, Life Camp Inc., everyone can go on Instagram and follow them. The current CMS site that I am at right now, we don't have social media, but there are at least 22 CMS sites, anti-gun violence sites throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City. So if you do Google it, you can find which one is the closest to you. And I would say volunteer. I always tell people, if you have a bad cousin, a bad little sibling that's not doing what they're supposed to do, send them over there as soon as possible. I just run around saying it, like, just send them our way. As far as the NAACP, you can go to naacp.com and join your nearest chapter. I work with the Jamaica Youth Council, and we meet every third Thursday of the month. And Coalition of Passionate Youth. You can also follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram is coalition_of_passionate youth. And another way that I always just say is just to, hold each other accountable and help people know about their rights, like as much as you can. Any simple thing you find out, just spread it to the next person so they know, so they're not manipulated by law enforcement. Yeah, that's about it.
With us, y'all can follow us at Stockton Stands, a local nonprofit. We focus on like a lot of innovative problem solving in the fields of like anti-poverty, criminal justice work, as well as education through community planning, policy making, and then trying to work to remove stigmas. And so like we've been using it as kind of an incubator of meeting people where they're at. So it doesn't matter if y'all like photography, whether you're on law, whether y'all doing math, like any field, we're open to taking folks and really moving those type of ideas into real implementation so that we have a focal point for youth to really be involved. I'm one of the co-founders, and so we're a Black and Brown youth-led nonprofit. And so one of the campaigns that we're really trying to work on right now is working through abolition. So we do a lot of teach-ins in-house, as well as looking at what rebranding our local police department to turn into a public health department will look like in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you for just sharing some of what you all are doing and how folks can support you. We want to go into sort of more specifically talking about solutions. I think it's not lost on any of us that gun violence is definitely on a rise, although as we monitor crime patterns, crime overall has gone down across the country, but homicides and shootings have continued to spike some 200% since the start of the pandemic. And that's a reality that we're all experiencing in our communities. I'm sure that all of you can speak to some of that gruesome reality that you're experiencing in your community. But I want to hear from you all, right, as we experience continue updates and just ongoing media pushes around gun violence and the spike in crime. There's a lot of fear mongering, and all of it seems like noise. There's no direct effort, or there's no direct initiative that people are being pointed towards on what they can do. And so want to hear from you all, what are some real solutions to this crisis, and how do you all see your communities grappling with the crisis of gun violence?
That's a good question because, with the juvenile hall shutdown, folks are really like, a lot of people in community are like against it because they're like, it saved me. And, these youth are wilding out here. They got guns and all this. And it's real. Gun violence is real. And it's a real conversation to have. And it's like a point that we always make is like, gun violence is happening and jails is here. Like, you feel me? So it's like, that's not the solution to gun violence. It's really sounding like these programs that our fellow panelists are bringing up that are happening in their community that we need to uplift. Because so I think that's where we're at right now in San Francisco, and like hopefully across the Bay Area region is like more gun violence crisis intervention programs, like trusted native OGs, community leaders, like really stepping in and like getting to the youth, like touching to the youth and even the adults, and like and then like mental health programs, like resources. So it's like addressing the circumstances that folks like Destiny brought up. Like, you don't wake up trying to be violent. It's like your environment, your circumstances. So addressing those issues at hand. So yeah.
Yeah, so I like exactly what you said. So yeah, it's just basically like, because I see like a lot of the times they trying to use this gun violence, the rise on gun violence, as it correlating with criminal reform, right? They trying to say, oh, you guys doing all this criminal reform and you trying to get people out. We advocate and let people out of jail and closing all these jails, but the rise on crime is going up, but the rise on gun violence is going up. But you guys but they're not taking into consideration the pandemic, like okay, since the pandemic has started, the rise on crime, and not just gun violence, all crime as a whole has risen. So it's a lot of things. Just like Tumani said, I feel like the big homies and the guys that's been in the streets just need to talk to the youngins and the older cats that's doing their dirt out there, and just tell them like gun violence ain't the way. Like, we should and talk to the gang, like the gangs. We should have sit downs with the top dogs and the gangs, right, and have sit downs with them and try to make truces and try to stop this gun violence, and maybe channel this anger out somewhere else, like boxing gyms, instead of everybody trying to shoot each other. Let's go to the boxing gym and let's have like we can box it out or something.
I agree with the previous panelists, because gun violence is so complex that it's hard to just say like what's the right solution. But everything that you all said is correct. Like, we need more mental health services within our community. We need healthy ways for youth to channel their anger. Even when you think of being at high school, I don't know about for everyone else, but for my high school, I went to high school in Queens. It was like one guidance counselor to hundreds of students, and it's like they cannot really channel their anger or even feel comfortable speaking to someone about their problems. But if we have more mental health resources in our communities, and youth can have a positive outlook or a positive way to channel their anger rather than taking it out on each other, that can make a difference. And like Kai also said, not making it normal when gun violence happens. When someone is shot, we should make a huge deal out of it, and we should shame that person. Like, yo, that was not cool. Like, make them feel bad. Like, that wasn't cute. That's not cool, and that's not gonna go down in our community. And it takes everyone to do that, not just the big homies. It takes the big homies and it takes the little homies too, because sometimes they're doing it to impress other little homies, so they got to be the ones to tell each other like that's not cool. um yeah, and I think that just more of a community effort, all of us working together, it could make a big difference. And it has, and it will make a even greater difference.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with the previous panelists. I'm not gonna like beat the drum again. But I think in terms of, looking at what needs support in our communities, I think if we're talking about like our goal being to, proliferate the life of people all around us and, have them live longer lives, then I think we need to look at our budgetary priorities and figure out why we're spending so much on policing them as well as militancy. And I always ask people, because, gun violence is extremely real. I think we're at 19 homicides in Stockton with, I think, twice as many injured or more shootings. And so it's definitely something that like we have to be cautious about, because, even people tell me sometimes, I have to moderate my language, and I understand it because, the trauma that's, really compacted on one side of our city, especially knowing that it was redlined halfway through, it's extremely real. And, me going up to them and telling them that like, the service that is, institutionalized in their collective memory needs to be divested from, that's a hard hit. But it's also understanding that we do need roundabout services that are efforted in, actual violence prevention, not coming in after the fact, whereas we have maybe a 30% clearing rate for the homicides. And so we know that where we are right now situated, it's not working. I think what we're doing in the future is looking at what services will kind of help to remedy that type of problems.
That is so spot on. I appreciate all of you for articulately answering that question. I'm thinking a little bit about some of what you all said, the closure of DJJ facilities, the intersection between criminal justice and gun violence, and I think that's a conversation that's happening on a national stage. And so, for the audience members who may be confused about what the alternatives are, where these young people are going to go, what are the outside programs, I'd love to hear from you all. What are some alternatives to incarceration, and what are some real solutions that would allow us to both ensure that young people are able to thrive in our communities and be reintegrated into our communities, but also make sure that our communities are safe. So would love to hear from you all. What are the alternatives that are being considered?
Okay, so what we're doing in California, so we're looking to open up these secure youth track facilities, right? So these secure youth track facilities won't have cells, right? That's important. And right now we don't have facilities. Right now we don't have a set facility set up, but we do have camps that were closed, right? And those are going to be like the temporary secure youth track facilities. And these facilities won't have probation staff, right? They won't have, that authority of, okay, a staff is, with the badge, the spray, and all that stuff. Like, it won't be that 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 opposition between each other. It's like more of a mental health, like, and more community credible messengers are going to be there. It's not just going to be like it's not going to be it's not going to be a facility. It's going to be more like home, right? And that's way better, because I wish it was like that when I was down. So it'd be way better to have these facilities that treat trauma, right? Because if you put in somebody and you taking somebody from a trauma place, like poverty place, the hood, and put them in a facility with more trauma, you just not really doing anything. So if you're going to take a youth out of his community, well, you need to put him in a community that can fix that trauma, or do something to at least work on that trauma, right? Because that's all it is. And I tried to dissect gang banging when I was down for those 5 years. I tried to dissect it, and I came to a realization, like, most of gang banging is that it's like hurt and traumatized kids throwing more hurt and trauma onto the next, right? And that's just what it is. So it's just a group of people just throwing trauma onto each other, throwing their hurt upon each other. So we need to come, and these facilities are going to be set up to work through that trauma, right? Because a lot of these facilities don't work through that trauma. It's just kids going into see facilities, and they're still fighting, they're still doing this and doing that, because they're still throwing their hurt onto each other. So we're going to build these facilities to go through and dissect the hurt and trauma, and where did it start, and how you feel about it, and stuff like that. So this is what these new facilities are going to be based on, like, really, like, putting the focus on the trauma.
Um, yes. So what I can speak on is like an alternative to incarceration is like a program like Young Women's Freedom Center. You know, like a place where people aren't looking at you like you did wrong, but like giving you a second chance of like, I see you for who you are today. Like I see you working on your self-determination and like your goals and your transformation. And then it's like they're still working on like, you know, the logistics of like what the place will look like. But at the end of the day, we know folks need to have dignity, whether it's long term or like short term. And I know they are working on the Credible Messenger program. So like somebody not attached to the system, not a staff, like not a probation officer. And what else? And then it's like these changing the systems of like when youth get detained. So like when the like police are contacted, a community leader comes there. Like no youth should be having like contact with the police without a trusted adult there with them to like advocate with them and like for them. And also having community be a part of like the decision making of like what the charge is, and like expediting like placement. So like housing is an alternative. That's also like something I forgot to uplift when you're like, what are y'all doing to create safety? Because like youth stay in there. The trends that youth stay in juvenile hall for San Francisco is out of home placement, like violations, probation violation, and then like robbery, like low offense robbery. So it's like it's resources. Youth need resources, housing, and supportive systems that aren't probation, like non-punitive systems. So those are the alternatives. Check.
Yeah, no, I definitely harp on the same thing. I think there's definitely a need for heavy investments into supportive services that are definitely non-punitive. I think definitely one of the focuses has to be on, you know, creating a barrier in which generational trauma becomes a consistency. But I think also, you know, we can build as many support services. So, you know, looking at things like drug diversion programs, looking at, you know, having, I work at ALTCOV, which is like a or it's a mental health group that's centered under Stanford's Think for Youth and Wellness, but they're doing a lot of youth advocacy work in terms of trying to be culturally relevant, as well as socioeconomically relevant, in terms of knowing that there's a lot of stigmas to mental health. And I think 50 to 75% of onset or of illnesses are already onset by the time people are reaching 14. So there has to be heavy investment, but it has to be extremely early. Looking more so at like, you know, when kids are 5, 7, starting there, because it's understanding that like we can put as many supportive services out there as we want, but if we're, you know, creating this endemic where people are routinely put in positions where they have to become part of these lives, then I don't think that, you know, we're hitting the root causes. We're being more symptomatic and reactive rather than being systemic and hit rooting causes, which is, you know, having things like a mass redistribution of wealth so that people actually have living wage jobs, and so people are able to pay bills and not spend more than 50% of their wages on just housing alone. I think our homeless population has continued to grow year over year, and so like we're not helping anything when we're putting people in positions where they have to be like living this life from the jump.
I think all of the panelists hit the needle on the head, and I really don't have anything to add because you all like just covered it so well, for sure.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all's answer. Just wanted to also add, as our organization, we also are involved in the work around the closing of youth prisons and the work around SB 823. And so it's incredibly important right now. And I think for those who are who are from California, who are there is a lane for everyone where we are asking folks to people who live within your county. They have a plan where folks can participate in really developing what that alternative looks like. It's supposed to be a community-driven process where folks are able to weigh in and say, this is what our community needs in terms of what resources and programs young people need. And so alternatively, like what SB 823 says is that you don't necessarily have to have confinement for young people. It could look like a program, whether or not we send young people to college, or whether or not we know that the criminal justice system spends more on incarceration than they do than young people in their public education system. In California, we spent nearly $111,000 per youth incarcerated than we spent on a youth who goes to the California public education system, which is about $11,000. And so we can send kids to Harvard, Stanford. We can send pay for full tuitions for young people. And so imagine what we would do when we reinvest those dollars. And we also been actively involved in a lot of our diversion work right now. And many of you all lifted that up. And so really, I think the work that is happening, I just want to appreciate all of you for really thinking about what that looks like for our young people, because it's so important. I wanted to jump into one of our last questions that we have for you all around, do you all believe law enforcement should play a role in public safety? And so if any of you feel open to answering this question, love to hear from you all. And then we have a final question that we'll end with that's more on a reimagining, thoughtful. And so if anyone wants to answer that question.
I believe that that law enforcement should only be involved in certain, or be dispatched to certain circumstances. Like if there's a if there's like a mental health crisis, there's a mental health guy, he has a knife or something like that. I don't believe police officers should be called. I believe somebody who has, a degree in, in mental health or something like that should be called, dispatched there. Or if there's youth, like let's say if there's youth involved in a crime, I feel like there should be like a youth organization that goes and deals with the youth. But like certain things, I feel like the police shouldn't be involved with.
Yeah, I'm thinking like it's like changing the whole structure of law enforcement, because it's like we do need de-escalation, we do need support, like we need help when in danger or not safe, but like who do you call when law enforcement causes the hurt and harm to our community? So it's like transforming that whole system and like redefining like law enforcement, like you're enforcing the law, not enforcing like harm, like yeah. And then also speaking like on what Kai brought up, like having like more, because like when you call 911, police first want to come when it's like a fire or domestic violence or whatever like situation. So it's like having more like specified professionals for those like specific situations that are happening. So yeah, just really transforming the whole system.
I would definitely agree. I think when it comes to public safety, law enforcement is not needed in a lot of things that they are currently used for, such as mental health, nonviolent offenses, things of that nature. But I do agree that, to some extent, you do have to have people that are there to hold others accountable when they're doing certain things. But again, we have to reimagine what that looks like, and it shouldn't be so invasive and violent and pervasive as it is now. We have to reimagine something that will actually be helpful and rehabilitative to the community.
For me personally, I don't believe that law enforcement would have to play uh, a future role in our public safety system. I think that like my envisioning is definitely more like optimistic, I guess, and kind of, I guess, more so toward like a utopia where we could live more so with the research that are needed. And so these, things that are happening, I do feel like 99% of the people who are incarcerated right now pose no threat to society if they were to be given, basic needs. But I believe as, the richest country in the world, I feel like, to not be able to provide basic human rights for its own citizenry, I think there's a lot of denigration in there. And then I also think that in terms of, reimagining what a public safety system looks like, I think in America specifically, looking at the, root historical efforts of building up law enforcement, I think the institution has a very adversarial relationship with specifically Black people, as well as, people in poverty, so low socioeconomic bars. And then I think also law enforcement isn't, I think my realization is that laws are very subjective. They are not moral maxims that, everyone has to follow by, because I don't think that every law that we have on the book has protection for Black people, people who are deemed surplus in the society. And so for me, I feel like there could be a higher resonation for imagining a world in which, we are adamantly able to, prevent these root causes of violence, for sure.
Thank you all so much for answering that question. And it's complex, it's nuanced, and there's a lot of things that still have to be in place right now as we're reimagining these systems. But I truly believe in that one day we will have a system that doesn't harm us, that doesn't make us feel unsafe. And it's really on us to continue to do this work to ensure that we put those measures in place. And so we, as we've had this conversation, I just want to appreciate each and every one of you as we're coming to a close to our program. Just been very inspired by the work that you all have been doing, this work that you're doing. Not anyone could just jump in and do it, but it's because lived experiences, it's because how personal it is for you and for your community. And so I just want to say that I acknowledge and see all of the work that you all are putting in your communities, from Compton to Queens to San Francisco, from Stockton, and for all the young people really across the country who are also in this fight and committed. Our organization is really rooted in legacy. And as was mentioned earlier, our founder, Mr. Harry Belafonte, and also our CEO and president, Carmen Perez Jordan, who always reminds us that there's a lane for each and every one of us. And so as we are an intergenerational organization who honors the past and history of legacy and the fight that was before us, from our elders and folks who really paved the way so that we can really be stepping into some of this place and to pick up some of this fight. We want to end with you all answering sort of what type of ancestor you want to be. And so if you all want to just, each of you want to end with that, and then we will we'll close out our program, and I'll pass it to Lewis, who would take it from there.
Y'all thinking deep. I
I
love
know.
it. I see it. I see it.
All right, I could kick us off. That's a real question. I've been thinking lately, like I want to create space and pathways for those that look like me, came from like where I come from, to be successful, and then also define like, and also allow the space for them to define what is successful, and like just like healing and having fun and like laughing and like dancing and all that. So I'm trying to like put that into like what type of ancestor I'll be, but like that's what I would come with. Like that's how I'll be remembered, and that's like the legacy I leave behind. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Oh, so what type of ancestor do it? Well, see, I feel like I'm just gonna go for it. So I feel like if Martin Luther King was alive, Malcolm X, like I feel like what we doing right now is what they were doing. So I feel like we just following in their footsteps, right? Like, they were fighting for, civil rights and stuff like that. But now we're fighting for, criminal reform. And we're fighting for, what's right in 2022. So I feel like we're just paving our ways. And I feel like, 20, 30 years from now when we're older, or we're the top dogs, and we're and when we become the ancestors, we're gonna be remembered as the Malcolm X's, the Rodney Kings, the Rosa Parks. We're gonna be them, like us on this panel, and the people that we our colleagues, the people that we work with. I feel like this is what, if we were back in those ages, in the Martin Luther King ages and the Malcolm X ages, I feel like we would have been alongside them. So all we're doing right now is just continuing what our ancestors were doing, basically. So I just feel like everybody here is just gonna be, ancestors that are gonna be remembered, that fought for a change, that fought for our people, and not just for our people, but for all people.
Type of ancestor that I want to be remembered as is one who just never gave up despite what was going on, who was always resilient, always showed up, and who led with love and style at the same time. Yeah, that's it.
Heavy on the style. I love this. We stand on the shoulder of greats, and so just love the way in which you all
Yes.
articulate your responses to this. I want to move us to our closing here, and so I'd love to sort of close with a statement from you all, and I'll read it off and want you all to complete it with a word or two. The statement says, "I'm not afraid to use my voice to defend and protect." Again, I'm not afraid to use my voice to defend and protect. And so would love for you all to complete that sentence in your own ways.
I would say that I'm not afraid to use my voice to defend and protect young Black children who feel like they're not enough.
You're muted.
Hear
I
me now?
heard you, Destiny. I heard
Oh.
you.
um,
I think it might be an audio issue for you, Tumani.
oh,
But I heard you, Destiny.
okay.
Okay, so I'm not afraid to use my voice and to defend and protect the people. You know, that's that's, that's the best I can give that, because that's what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for the people. So not I'm not afraid for you, for the people.
Wait, what's the line again?
I'm not afraid to use my voice to defend and protect. Dot dot dot.
I'm not afraid to defend and to use my voice to defend and protect, because others did the same for me. So like, and like, the cycle continues. Like, I'm gonna use it to end the, generational trauma and like build wealth and health and all that. So check.
Yes, yes, yes. I love all of these responses and really love this dialogue. I think it's been a few months since our last Our Voice, Our Power, but this sort of reconciles it and brings all the reason why we host these platforms for young people. And so I just want to thank you all individually, Kyaune, Destiny, Tumani, and all of you who joined us this evening. I really, really appreciate you all and your words and experiences that you brought to this space. I think that we did exactly what we came here for. We're defining what safety looks like for us. And I think that's what we need, not just for our generation, but for generations to come. And so, as Jasmine said before, the Gathering for Justice continues to build a legacy of deep intergenerational relationships. And so it's beautiful to hear the ways in which you all are not just standing on the shoulders of greats, but paving the way and wanting to be greats. I shared earlier a quote that I saw online that reads, we don't do this work for recognition, but we do work powerful enough to be recognized. And so I appreciate you all for doing the work, for showing up, standing in the line for other young people. I know as a youth organizer myself, it's not easy. We oftentimes have to hold our own feet to the fire. Um, and sometimes it comes with the punches, it comes with the heat. And so I'm incredibly proud of you all and want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. Once again, as we find ourselves in a time, knowing that there's so much more to discuss, so much more in this conversation, amidst crisis, amidst violence, amidst dialogue. There's something everybody could do, and so continue to follow and support each one of our panelists. Their information, their handles, their links have been dropped in the chats in which you all are watching through the stream. I appreciate everyone who has contributed and left beautiful messages. I think some of you are able to see it here on the panel, and some of them are being brought into screen. But folks are sending love and gratitude and thanks for your wisdom and your knowledge that was dropped in this panel. And so, again, just want to thank you all. And to keep up with our work here at the Gathering for Justice, I would encourage you all to follow us at NY Justice League. Again, that's at NY Justice League, as well as at Gather4Justice on Twitter and Instagram. And finally, you can continue to support our work by making contribution on Cash App, which is $Gathering4Justice, texting the Gathering to 44321 to stay tapped into our work, or visiting our website at gatheringforjustice.org to subscribe to our newsletter and learn more about the work that we're doing. And so please join us for future dialogues in Our Voice, Our Powers, and send all your love and follow and support the work of our incredibly wise and powerful panelists who joined us this evening. Again, thank you all, and join us on this journey in defining safety for youth. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.